Great. Thank you all for joining us for this roundtable discussion of the Washingtonian Residential Design Awards for 2022. The Washingtonian program recognizes distinctive residential projects, regardless of size, for excellence in total design, which includes aesthetics, programmatic response, and sustainability. We've done this program in cooperation with the Washingtonian for 40 years. It's our 40th anniversary. So thank you, Washingtonian, for supporting this program. I want to introduce our jury. So if we can go to the next slide. Great. We had Hilary Sample, FAIA, with MOS Architects in New York City. She couldn't be on the call with us today, but luckily we have Neil Hauck, AIA, with Neil Hauck Architects in Darien, Connecticut, and Mayva Donnon of KSS Architects in Philadelphia. The jury met on Monday to discuss the projects and the framework for design excellence. We're going to go through each of the winning projects. I'll be reading the name of the project and the winning firm, and then Mayva and Neil will discuss. Katie's going to be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions about that you want to ask our jurors, please do that. And okay, let's move on to our first winner. The first award is an honorable mention to the Brooks Short-Term Housing Facility by Ayers St. Gross.
Well, so I like the fact that this addresses a critical need for transitional housing. And I also love the fact that though it's a simple rectangular mass, it was nicely articulated. I thought the architect did some nice things to keep it, interesting and lively, and on a budget as well. So.
Yeah, I think that's right, Neil. I mean, we loved the mission of the program. Obviously, it's a wonderful mission to support people who might be at a point of transition in their lives. And looking at this project, the execution was, it feels very sophisticated and elevated. And I imagine that the design team probably had a fairly lean budget. This is not a luxury high rise, obviously. And so for folks at that stage of their lives, who might be potentially in a difficult place, I thought this was wonderful to give people a place that they would feel really proud to call home, even if it is on a short-term basis. So really, really beautiful project.
Agreed.
The next honorable mention is 3131 CBR by David Jameson Architect.
So, Mayva, why don't you start on this?
Yeah, sure. So I thought the story here was really interesting. The idea of, time is money, and the construction system is obviously interesting. It's sustainable. It's a prefabricated construction system. And the end result, I think, is really well done. It certainly, as you navigate the interior spaces, there's a nice nuance. There's an economy in the way that the plan is assembled, but there's some nice nuance and some nice spaces that are being created. And I think this is a really great example of just, how the storytelling can really add a layer of richness in terms of the presentation, beyond just the images of the project and the plans and things like that, but to understand sort of some of the backstory about the construction system and why that was important. I think was really helpful and interesting.
Yes, and in the presentation, in the submission, there were photos of the panels being made in the factory, for instance, and being erected on site. And I thought that we all felt that was pretty compelling to see that it actually came together that way.
Our next award is a detail award for the staircase at the Balanced House by KUBE Architecture.
There were a number of row home renovations that were really, well done. And the row home, as a Philadelphia resident, certainly has a special place in my heart too. It's very much the historic fabric of the city. A lot of our urban cities on the East Coast. And in particular, this project had just we were just really drawn to the stair. It's detailing is interesting, and I thought it was very innovative in terms of the way that it engages the rest of the space and then allows light to come through in strategic ways, and really drew this particular detail really drew our eye.
Yes, it did. And I think it's also a wonderful palette of materials. You know, the way the warmth of the wood plays off the, you know, the coldness of the steel. Very nicely done.
Our next award is also a detail award for the loft at a 15-year library for 10,000 books by Mcinturff Architects.
So I think we all love the fact that that this project embraced books and reading, and you know, something that's somewhat of a lost art these days, with you know, everything being you know, so short. The detailing of this particular addition to the house was very well done. I was struck by the fact that it was an addition, that this was a phase 2. So the house was built, and then they knew they wanted to add this library, but it was not affordable in the first project, and they added it later. And the detailing with the
Oh, I think we got a connection issue.
Go light.
Oh. Mayva, did you have any comments on this at all?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
You were just breaking up there, Neil. So I don't know if you want to repeat what you were just about to comment on the detailing.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the detailing was elegant. I liked the way the glass floor allowed light to filter back through into the 2 lower floors of the house. But it was a great little spot to go read. I'd want to be there reading and looking out to the landscape.
Yeah, I think the positioning of the intervention being perched up high and having the view out as well as the view down and around, you know, just as a space to occupy, you know, seems like a really interesting and exciting perch, and just being able to look at it from underneath. So the way that the space that kind of reading perch interacts with the rest of the space was really interesting. And, you know, I can see this family loves books, and I think that's a really great thing to celebrate at this moment in time when, you know, it seems like attention spans are increasingly short, and the space is to have, you know, longer ideas that you can absorb in books seem to be in short supply. So this was really great and inspiring to see.
All right, our first Washingtonian award is for Carver Hall by Bonstra Hairsign Architects.
So this building has a rich history that was embraced in the submission, and you know, the architects, I think, did well. That slide is a great slide right there. I was really drawn by the entry sequence from street to the entry courtyard, pulling through into the public spaces of the building, and then through that to a garden in the back. I thought that was nicely designed, and this drawing was well done to express that. And I think that there were some subtle plan moves made to change the way the hallways were laid out, that added some very nice spaces in the inside of the plan.
Yeah, and it's nice to see too that the interventions on the inside of the building, I think, actually make the plan better, right? Particularly when you look at the housing floors, you know, the corridor before was just this, you know, dead shot long corridor. And some, yeah, and by some little moves, it also allows, I think, for better size living units, as well as a better kind of experience walking down that hallway. So it was nice to see, taking historic fabric and making interventions that modernize it and make it more, maybe a little bit more amenable to the way that we live
Yeah.
now.
And then even some of the moves on the outside, some of the window treatments, I think enlivened the
Okay, I guess, Katie, we should move to the next one. Clear View in Foggy Bottom by Bonster Hairsign Architects.
My screen seems to be frozen. Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, Neil, I think you're having a little bit of an internet problem. If there's anything you can do.
I'm sorry about that. I was on a Zoom earlier and had no problems, so.
Of course not.
Of course not. It wouldn't be a Zoom call if somebody wasn't having some kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, about this project, there were a number of row home renovations that were all, a lot of really beautiful homes that were shared. This one in particular stood out. It's only 12 feet wide, which we thought was really interesting because it certainly feels much more spacious. And again, the openings that were introduced, a couple of fairly simple moves here to introduce a skylight and then a glass floor and detail the stair in a way that allows the light to really pull all the way through the building. It's a move that had a lot of impact, I think, in terms of making the spaces feel, more, the interior spaces feel more spacious.
I agree with all of that. Yeah, I thought it was a wonderful project. And I was really intrigued by the fact that it was only 12 feet wide. And I think they really made it feel like a much larger space. The one thing I wish was that they showed a before shot of the front elevation. I don't think they ever showed that. And I was curious to know what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And to round out their trifecta, Hauck and Ford by Bonster Hairsign Architects wins a Washingtonian Award.
So it's interesting to me that this firm is able to do excellent design work at all scales. I mean, this was I thought a very successful project that took, that's a great shot right there. It took an old pair of office buildings, completely renovated them to be residential. And I thought that the way they dealt with the facade was very well done. It sort of reminded me of the first time I saw Cesar Pelli's tower for above the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It was a very, rich textured facade. And I think they did a wonderful job of designing the link between the two buildings as well. Nice and open and airy, and just feels good.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting project to watch just from the current trends that we're all experiencing like this right now. We're all doing this remotely, right? And absorbing, what is going to be the long-term lasting changes from all of what we've gone through in the pandemic with this big experiment in remote work, and seeing, the really coming into question, what are the future of office buildings, and how do we reposition if in fact, office space really is going to be something wayside or has its moment, like retail had, of reckoning, right, of reconsidering what's its role in our modern world. What happens to those buildings? And I think this was a really great example of how that building can be repositioned as an asset, rather than wholesale demolish, rebuild the site, which is interesting to me from a sustainability standpoint, as well as providing a great design example for other folks to aspire to. Yeah, it's interesting to see now the names of the architects, and so kudos to Bonster Hairsign. Yeah, I would I would not have guessed these, very different scale of residential to office building in Carver Hall. That really speaks well to what you're doing there.
Great. Our next project is the Silva by Core Architecture and Design and Grimshaw.
Yeah, I think we were all drawn to this facade and the, kind of the use of the balconies to create these projecting elements that add a real layer of interest to what you see from the exterior as well as the interior experience. Those spaces, they feel they have a lot of daylight, very well lit from the interior as well as from the exterior. So, and the palette of materials on the exteriors is restrained, and there's really a lot that comes from that move of the balconies that begin to kind of project an angle to make a really fun facade.
Great. Gail, did you want to comment? Oh, Capitol Hill Micro Community by L Studio is our next winner.
Yeah, so this was another, I think Neil might be frozen.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm so sorry.
Oh, here he's
back.
He's back. So I think
I love that last project, by the way. I thought.
Oh, go ahead. You didn't get a chance to comment.
You want to go? You want to go back?
I'm sorry. I somehow lost my connection, but I thought that I was struck by.
Maybe you want to roll back a bit.
First time I looked at it. Yeah. Oriel windows projected out over the setback line, which was permitted by the zoning code. And I thought that was an interesting move on their part.
Yeah. So Neil, one of our participants is saying that maybe you should turn your video off and then we can hear you a little bit better. Not that we don't like seeing you, sorry about that. So if we'll move on to the Capitol Hill Micro Community by L Studio.
Yeah, so this was another one that looked at the row home and it embraced the importance of its role in terms of the fabric of the city as a residential housing stock. But I think this was successful in looking at, how do we create potentially a new model out of that, for either smaller living units as well as the communal aspect here, which I thought was really interesting to have that the courtyard in the center of the building, to have the stair and the kind of the opportunities for daylight that opens up for the row homes, as well as to potentially create community within this group of homes. The exterior is also really very, very nicely done, and the materials there are balanced, in terms of bringing in some nice highlights with the copper and certainly the white masonry feels like it references the row home, the kind of classic row home, without being exactly tied to being a red brick building, which is kind of so ubiquitous with the traditional row home.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, for me, the compelling thing about this was the shared courtyard. So one enters from the street into a courtyard rather than up a stoop and into the front door. And then there were the transparency on the side walls of the courtyard allowed light in to each of the units, and also, I think, provided a sense of community.
Great. The next project is Refuge. I'm just going to say Refuge. There's that extra R there, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it, by Page.
So I was struck by the fact that that they used, first of all, they used found objects, a jetty in the landscape to kind of organize the site. And I love the fact that they used excavated material to create a berm that created some privacy behind it. And one entered through a portal. I thought the entry sequence was very nicely done. And the spaces, the way the spaces worked off that entry spine, I thought they were laid out well. It's a place that I just felt comfortable in.
Yeah, it was striking the way that the berms really began to kind of blend and create this kind of entry experience that you kind of come through this portal. And I think it was successful. The narrative that it described was that, and I think we've got it up here on the page, I want the house to not feel plopped down. And I think it is successful in achieving that that aspiration for the project, and the connection, out to the water, I think is also striking. Just a really beautiful project. We did see a couple of really beautiful beach houses, and this one certainly stood out for the way that it integrated with the site to achieve the goals as well as some sustainability objectives.
Great. Our kitchen winner is Treehouse Annex, an urban forest kitchen by Hauck Architects.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a great example of, how much impact can you have in a small project. And there's a couple of just really simple moves here, with the skylight and the window wrapping down that really brings all of this daylight, as well as the view out into the forest, that you really begin to feel, connected, as well as, the getting the experience of all of the daylight in the space, and the sighting of the deck being sensitive to sort of mind some of the different existing trees, so that it really sort of nestles into the existing site. Really, really well done project. And it, honestly, it also felt like, even given its small scale compared to other projects of much larger scale, it really stood out, which is, a real kudos to the design team.
Yeah, I loved the, well, first of all, I love the minimal impact on the landscape with just those few steel pipe columns touching the earth. And the fact that it obviously wasn't a huge construction budget. And I loved the fact that they were able to create really good design on a budget. I loved also the continuation between the windows and the skylights really allowed. Yeah, that really allowed one to get a great view up into the trees and feel as though you're part of nature. Yeah, that was a great slide.
Yeah, I think this really captures kind of what got our attention with this project. And it's remarkable, just a couple of really thoughtful moves had such a great impact.
And I don't think I'm giving anything away, but it was the immediate, all three of you were just really captivated by this. Yeah. This was like, everyone said yes right away. So moving to our next project, which I think is our final, it's also by Hauck Architects, is a garden annex, an urban oasis in the time of Corona.
I loved the title of this one. And here again, same thing. I think that there was a few subtle moves really made this very successful. I love the way the room opens up to a small deck, and then from there to a patio. Love the detailing on the walls, on the shelves on the walls. It's just very simple plywood, It shows how a good architect can create good design without needing an extensive budget.
Yeah, yep. And I think the photographs capture the space well, so that you really get a sense of, of that connection to the outside, and as well as some of the details. It's, when you have a small intervention, there's having that kind of economy with the number of materials and the number of moves that you introduce, I think is definitely shows here as a key to success for, so the plywood wrapping from the ceiling down to the walls, and balanced with just another simple material in the space, which looks like it was maybe the outside of the existing home. So yeah, I think I want one of these. I mean, I saw this and I thought, why didn't I put one of these in my backyard during the pandemic? So really, really great space.
Well, this project and the previous one, the drawings were on both projects were very well done. And I think we were all struck by that as well.
Right, and you had I think this is our last project, Katie, is that correct? Do we just have the final slide? Or, yes, congratulations to everyone. And we will have our Design Awards celebration on December 1st. So make sure you tune in for that. But just to have a discussion with you about this, drawings were a big discussion that you had, whether the drawings connected back to the built form. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think when one puts together a submission for a design award, sometimes the photographs are very powerful, but maybe the drawings are not, or the narrative isn't quite up to par. So sometimes there's sort of a disconnect. And when you see a project where all three of them are done, it just sort of rises above, the others and distinguishes itself. And we were very aware of the drawings, the quality of the drawings in our discussion. It came up a number of times.
Yeah, drawings are, they're a way of communicating, right, about the idea, and in a different way than what the photograph or what the words can let you, say, right, about the project. So I think it's a good point that these are all of the tools, at your fingertips in order to communicate, what the project was about and what was important. There was a lot of really beautiful work here. So it was, going through the first pass, for me was tough, and it was inspiring to see, all of the great work that's been happening through the pandemic by this chapter. And I will say that the work out of that, that really rose to the top was work that was not just skillful from an aesthetic standpoint, but that maybe offered something new or different in terms of either the way that the material was handled, or as kind of a commentary on the typology. Those were things that also kind of rose to the surface. In addition to, what Neil has commented, that it was really the projects that had a really strong alignment of here's what we were well communicated, here's the story behind the project, as well as the graphic, the drawing representation, and the photograph. I think those were things that really helped some of these entries, really stand out and distinguish themselves. So, but kudos to the whole chapter. There was a lot of really great work here to look at.
Great. Are there any questions?
So.
Oh, go ahead, Neil.
I'd like to add to that, though, if I would, for a second. I thought the quality of the submissions was outstanding. And when I first went through them, I said, oh my God, how am I going to narrow this down? There are so many that are worthy of awards. They're very, very well done. And I thought as a whole, it was really a high quality group of projects. And it was very difficult. And we had a serious discussion on some of them. There were a few that we came close to awarding, but for one reason or another, it didn't happen. And I would encourage some of the people who didn't have their projects win to resubmit next year.
Great. Well, I have a little note in the chat. If anybody in our audience has any questions, to let us know. The projects will go up on the website fairly quickly. As you know, the big photograph on our website called The Hero, the opening slide, is always one of our winners. So those projects will be resident there. And again, we're going to have our Design Awards celebration on the December 1st as a part of our last section of Design DC. But I hope you'll join me in a round of applause virtually for our wonderful jurors and our internet issues notwithstanding. This was a wonderful discussion of all the projects, and congratulations to all the winners. So if we don't have any questions, Katie, you don't see any questions, do you? Oh, good. Neil can come back for a little while. So thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.